Before we begin, council, please put away cell phones. If you have personal business during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you are participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless you are speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to attendees, this meeting is being streamed live. The camera is in the back of the council chambers above the clock. Robert's Rules of Order is the parliamentary authority for council meetings under Wasilla Municipal Code 2.04.090. Under this authority, I respectfully request council observe the following. Kindly seek recognition before speaking. That no member speaks more than twice on the same motion without an affirmative vote on a motion to suspend the rules. That no member speaks a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. The purpose of recognizing these rules is to ensure the right to speak is equally respected and that discussion is not dominated. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Cottle.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Crafton.
Here.
Councilmember Vlock.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio.
Here.
You do have quorum, Madam Mayor. All members are present with us in chambers.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Dan Fleckenstein will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item of business is approval of the agenda. Before changes are discussed, are there conflicts of interest to declare?
Madam Mayor, on the agenda is AM number 2431, Renewal Contract Award to Big Dipper Construction Incorporated in the amount of $1,228,373 for utilities, equipment with operator services for fiscal year 2025. Also on the agenda is AM 2432, Renewal Contract Award to Big Dipper Construction Incorporation in the amount of $362,000 for road equipment with operator services for fiscal year 2025. I would like to make the public aware of my relationship with Big Dipper Construction. Big Dipper Construction is owned by my father. He is not a member of my household, and I have no financial interest in his company.
Okay, thank you. Are there changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. And there are no special orders of the day or commission and agencies report. We'll move on to public participation. Madam Clerk, please read the ordinance under public hearing by title.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ordinance serial number 2421, amending the fiscal year 2025 budget by accepting and appropriating Lowe's Hometown Heroes Grant in the amount of $21,000 for renovations to the dispatch center break room and offices at MATCOM.
Okay. And we are now at persons to be,
Going to open the public.
oh, I am going to open the public hearing. I need a motion to, on ordinance serial number 24-21.
Actually, we're going to open the public hearing on 2421 and call for public testimony.
Okay, we're opening the public hearing on serial number 2421 and asking for public testimony. Anyone that wishes to testify on ordinance serial number 2421, please come forward. You have 3 minutes. State your first and last name, and if you are a resident of the city. Seeing no one, I will close public hearing and bring it back to the dais. Do I have a motion on ordinance serial number 2421?
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance serial 2421.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Councilmember Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Graham. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson?
Just one quick question. I'm assuming that the MATCOM is really serviced by MTA, is that correct? Oh, never mind. It was, I had a brain short there. Drop that comment. Sorry.
Okay. Mr. Gray?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like, obviously, I am in support of this Hometown Heroes grant from Lowe's, which will go to improving the working situation of the dispatchers. That's a tough job in a tough place. This is going to give them a little bit more space to store their personal gear and to exercise some time away from the desk and not under the headset there. But I just wanted to express my sincere appreciation to Lowe's for making this grant possible, and to the local branch here for encouraging MATCOM to apply for that.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then we are on to the ordinance passes. And now we're on to persons to be heard. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Additionally, over the last year, the city of Wasilla has routinely had members of the public attend and read excerpts from novels, some of which involve sexual content and or description of incest or domestic violence that are not intended for children under the age of 14 and or may be triggering to listeners and viewers. For those of you with young children viewing and listening to this meeting, or who may be triggered by these descriptions of incest or domestic violence, please be aware we are now entering public comment, and you may want to mute the video or temporarily exit the meeting. We will notify the public when public comment has ended and council is moving on to the next item on the agenda. For those of you participating in public comment tonight, I respectfully ask you to remember that our attendees, viewers, and listeners may be under the age of 14 or victims of domestic violence and are not choosing to read the passages that you are choosing to read to them. So our first person is Eileen Fleckenstein. So Miss Eileen, please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name, and if you're a city resident, and your comments are limited to 3 minutes.
My name is Eileen Fleckenstein. I am representing Wasilla area seniors. I myself am not a city resident. I do want to first of all say thank you for a great 4th of July celebration. Good job. We had our Mouse for Meals 5K run walk. Very, very successful. A lot of familiar faces showed up to join us. For that, we appreciate your support and your presence. We raised $57,000 for our Mouse for Meals program, Meals on Wheels program. Right now, we are celebrating Christmas in July. We have some wonderful sponsors that have provided lunch every day as a gift, Christmas gift in July for our seniors. So you're welcome to come and join us for Christmas in July. And we have our new apartment building is under construction and moving along quite nicely, looking to open with residency in the fall, not sure exactly when yet. And WASI continues to take care of our senior citizens in the valley, and we appreciate the support that we get from you folks and from members of the community that want to help our seniors live independently for as long as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Senator David Wilson.
Hello, good evening, Council, Mayor. For the record, this is Senator David Wilson. I am a city resident of the city of Wasilla, just here to give a couple updates. Our office is open and just ready to do business. You know, it's amazing that how many people that are neighbors that I don't get to spend time with, you know, now we're here home and they wait till pay $700 to spend time with your elected officials to come see me in Juneau. So I tell folks, we're here now. It's a little cheaper to have a cup of coffee down the street than fly to come visit us while we're in session. So if you do have concerns, our office is open. Also want to thank Madam Mayor and especially Scott Bell over there for their wonderful job for the Mayor's Picnic, part of the Sunshine Rotary, as long as with your Deputy Administrator, Nygaard. And they did a fantastic job and serving hot dogs, and everyone was well fed. It was a well-ran, operated machine. You guys did a great job, and especially with the parade. And I know without, to my knowledge, without a hitch, I haven't heard anything else. And it was fun to see Mayor on that wonderful new snowplow, which we'll be happy to see in our neighborhood from a town near you. I also want to address a concern that's coming up here. This doesn't really apply for the city, but business, we want to keep Alaska open for business, and part of that here is NOAA. There's been a petition to close king fisheries and put them on the endangered species list, which would really ruin all fisheries, really, because how are you going to try to catch silvers during the same time that kings are spawning, or reds? And so this is an issue that we would like to address and just let folks know that they can go on the regulations.gov and search NOAA, and it's M Nancy, M Mary, F Frank, S Sierra, -2024-0042 is how to do public regulations to NOAA. And the public comment period ends July 23rd. So please, if you would, spread the word to send a petition to NOAA saying that please don't list kings on the endangered species list, because that would really close all fisheries around the state. And I know a lot of folks come through the Matsu to try their hand, even dip netting during that time period that kings might be spawning or going through would also be closed as well. So just want to let folks know about that. We do have a lot of set netters that live in the Matsu as well, and that would be an economic hardship for them. With that, like I said, I'll be around later on in afterwards to come back, and I'll probably come back during audience comments for another concern. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. Next is KJ Martin Albright.
Good evening. Sorry. My name is KJ Martin Albright. I earned my master's degree in library science from Indiana University Bloomington in 1999, and I was the only certified public library administrator in the state when I left the city in 2019, after working here for almost 17 years. The freedom to read is important to me. It is fundamental to public libraries, which are the cornerstone of democracy. Free and equitable access to information which examines all sides of an issue and not just one point of view is necessary for democracy to thrive. Censorship is a slippery slope, and I cannot recall any time in history where it was the good guys banning books. Public libraries respect the rights of parents to parent, and also that parents have the responsibility to parent. Almost on a daily basis, I encounter things that I would rather not see. The young ladies in Fred Meyer's wearing a sweatshirt that said, "If you think I look good now, you should see me bent over." Or the gas, grass, or ass, no one rides for free bumper sticker. Or the F Biden flags flying from the back of a pickup truck. Or a member of the public reading a descriptive passage of a child being raped by her father at a public meeting. In all of these instances, I didn't have a choice about whether to see or hear these things and whether or not my kids saw or heard these things. However, in the library and with books, I do have a choice. If something offends me in a book, I can shut it. It's that simple. Professionally trained librarians are qualified to develop public libraries collections for their communities, period. Wasilla has 3 master's degree librarians. They are the best people to develop the library's collection, and the council should support them in doing so. Public libraries are for everyone, all members of the public, all religions, all political viewpoints. If the real issues were obscenity, vulgarity, and pornography, the more effective approach would be creating public decency laws and enforcing them, or requiring pornography websites to actually verify a person's age prior to allowing access. Not attacking content between the covers of a book, which you have to choose to open, choose to read, and can choose to close. All this lets me know that the desire to ban books, move items around the collection, or whatever you want to call it this week, is not about community standards, but about the standards of a few who act as if it is their right to impose their beliefs on everyone else. Perhaps instead of spending so much time, money, and effort to control what is available in an institution that by definition belongs to everyone, they could operate a private library housing books that cater to their particular point of view. What it comes down to is this. I would much rather live in a community where the public library has something to offend everyone, as opposed to a public library that has nothing on its shelves, because that would be the only way to make sure there wasn't anything offensive. I hope that you agree, because censoring library materials is about so much more than just words printed on a page. I hope everyone had a great holiday weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Fleckenstein.
My name's Dan Fleckenstein, and I'm the president of Matsu Softball Association, and I wanted to come this evening to give a mid-season update as related to the management agreement between Matsu Softball and the city of Wasilla for the Bumpus Softball Complex. We kicked off the season back on May 5th with our field cleanup day, at which time we repaired the fences, the dugouts, the bleachers, brought in topsoil to add to the fields, and various other tasks to get the ballpark ready for season to begin. Our season runs from mid-May through the end of August, and our games occur Monday through Thursday each week. We have 12 games that we host per evening, and our game times are 6:40, 7:50, and 9. We have 50 registered teams in our league this year, and 770 players that are part of those teams. With combined with the umpires, concession workers, field maintenance, and spectators, there's approximately 1,000 people per week that come to the ballpark that enjoy the Bumpus Complex. Over the Memorial Weekend, we hosted a co-ed tournament, and at that tournament, we hosted 28 teams from around the state. It was a very successful tournament, and everybody seemed to have a really good time. Our next tournament coming up is called the Mugshot Showdown. It's scheduled for July 19th to the 21st, and we're expecting to have 35 men's teams at that tournament. This is the premier tournament in the state of Alaska for men's competitive various different levels. In the past, we've hosted teams from Anchorage, Fairbanks, Kenai, Juneau, Homer, Nome, Valdez, Kotzebue, and Talkeetna. So this will be a very big event for us, and everybody that comes, of course, needs a place to stay, they need food to eat, they need gas to put in their car. So we anticipate this having a positive impact on the community. We wanted to extend a sincere thank you from the Matsu Board of Directors to the City of Wasilla for repairing our paving in the last week. There was a need to repair the water system a couple years back, and there was a need to dig up the pavement for the runway that we put in to the ballpark. And that work was done last Monday night. It looks beautiful. The work was excellent, and we really sincerely appreciate your part in making that happen. It makes the ballpark look really nice and makes it easy for moms with strollers and other folks that have accessibility challenges to get into the ballpark. We have a challenge with our restrooms. Over the past 20 plus years, Matsu Softball has spent in excess of $150,000 renting portable bathrooms, and we would very much like to work with the City of Wasilla to improve the bathroom facilities at Bumpus Ballpark within the softball complex. We have financial resources, and we have manpower and physical resources to work together on that to help make sure they're maintained during season, that kind of thing. And we'd very much like to work with you on that. We wanted to invite you to come by the ballpark on July 20th, Saturday. That'll be the main course of our tournament coming up. There, like I say, there'll be about 35 teams there, and we'd just be thrilled if you guys could come by, take a look at the ballpark, see how we're running that, and see what's going on during that tournament. Thank you for your time, and hope you have a great summer.
Thank you. Public Works Director Shaw, don't we have a plan for the bathrooms at Bumpus?
We do. There's funding in this budget round to get going on that. So the paving that Mr. Fleckenstein talked about was a promise we made last year. It was added to the paving bid that we were completing, and we'll be working with the Softball Association and the other users. There's the other field next door to find the final placement where that bathroom should go.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay, Mark Ewing. Please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name and...
Mark Ewing in the city. First off, I'm not here to beat you up every time. I'm going to thank you tonight. for doing away with the grant program. I appreciate that. Mayor, for cutting the grass. I appreciate that. It looks great. And I hear we're getting new software so I can actually pay my bills online. It took me about 20 seconds to get into the council agenda tonight, but I cannot pay my stupid utility bill online. Another thing, I wanted to show you a problem with the utility bill. The little black strip here tells you the date that it's due. It's unreadable. Okay, now let's start with the good stuff. I like the fact you got internet access and a camera. I wish you guys would think about doing Zoom so that people, whether they're snowed in or whether they're elderly, can get online and come in and do this without getting in their car and driving down here on a winter's day. Well, I read through part of the code revision. I never seen so much red ink in my life. I hope you guys proceed. If you're going to do this, you take your time. There's a lot there. And I want to remind you that Anchorage still has a grandfather clause. And, you know, if the house is 50% burnt down, the clause goes away. And what it does, it keeps people from waking up one day and all of a sudden they're out of compliance. So tread softly, slowly through that process if you're going to do it. I don't know who's making the money on that. It looks like the attorney is, but the other thing I wanted to talk to you about again is that whatever that road's, Susitna, Roberts, I see the sign pointed up Roberts says Susitna now. I almost got hit there today up on the top of the hill, somebody coming out of where the tank is. And we've got no speed limit signs at all facing east, none. There's none at the top of the hill. I realize you're probably waiting to paint the road when everything else gets painted. But at least get some signs up. Man, they're cheap. You got one in front of my house, says 20 miles an hour, and the road is 300 feet long beyond my home. So, you know, if you can have a sign there, you can definitely get some signs up on that stretch of road. You got kids walking that road. You guys have been notified twice now about this, so hopefully nothing happens because the ball's in your court. And again, you're elected to be good stewards of the city, and I hope you'll do that. Thank you.
We are now on the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the items for approval under the consent agenda by title.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pardon me. We have the special meeting minutes, City Council, May 30th, 2024, June 3rd, 2024, and June 4th, 2024. We have two ordinances up for introduction. Recommended public hearing date, July 22nd, 2024. The first is ordinance serial number 2423, repealing Wasilla Municipal Code Chapter 244, Boards and Commissions generally, and enacting Wasilla Municipal Code Chapter 258, City Commissions, to clarify and update the duties and authority of the city commissions, permit commissions to compensate commissioners for training, mandate training, impose clear attendance requirements, and specific teleconference participation requirements. Secondly, we have ordinance serial number 2425, amending Wasilla Municipal Code Chapter 260, Planning Commission, to update and clarify the duties and authority of the Wasilla Planning Commission, authorize compensation for regular and special meetings attended, and codify the meeting and scheduling procedures by the commission. No resolutions, two action memorandums. The first is AM number 2431, renewal contract award to Big Dipper Construction Incorporated in the amount of $1,228,373 for utilities equipment with operator services for fiscal year 2025. And lastly, AM number 2432, renewal contract award to Big Dipper Construction Incorporated in the amount of $362,000 for road equipment with operator services for fiscal year 2025.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Madam Mayor, I move the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Crafton and seconded by Councilmember Cottle to approve the consent agenda as read. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. There is no unfinished business. We are now at new business. Madam Clerk, please read the title.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's discussion, consideration, and possible action on the draft rewrite of Wasilla Municipal Code Title 16, the Land Development Code, that repeals and reenacts Title 16 to substantially change the uses permitted in each zoning district, the review, enforcement, and permitting procedures, the planned unit development, landscaping, parking, conditional use, and variance procedures, and the design standards imposed by the city. This will be done in committee of the whole. And then just as a note to the public, discussion on the draft rewrite is expected to be continued at upcoming council meetings. Please contact my office beginning tomorrow for updated meeting information.
Okay. Is there a motion to enter the committee of the whole?
Madam Mayor, so moved by Councilman Johnson.
Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Johnson and seconded by Councilmember Vlock to enter the committee of the whole. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are now in committee of the whole. The time is 6:26 p.m. Zoe, you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the last several months, legal counsel, in cooperation with city administration, has been carefully considering Title 16 and the input received from members of the City Council and the Planning Commission, the public, city administration, and others, including folks in similar roles in other communities, to consider what provisions of Title 16 should potentially be modified, which provisions of Title 16 could remain and be harmonious with the proposed changes that we've received from these folks who have provided input. And we've prepared a detailed proposed red line ordinance for that Title 16 rewrite for council's consideration both tonight and in the upcoming months. Some of the feedback that we received regarding the current Title 16 as currently drafted was that it included landscaping provisions, which were difficult to understand and even harder to implement. That it, as a whole, was a complicated document which was inaccessible to members of the public and to developers. That included short-term rental provisions, which were burdensome for property owners and were not operating in the manner that council necessarily intended. So the feedback that we heard was that while council wanted to regulate short-term rentals to protect city neighborhoods, it wanted to do so in a way that would incentivize compliance and allow property owners to make productive use of their land and their buildings. We also heard concerns regarding parking requirements, particularly the impact of the landscaping requirements imposed by Title 16 on parking lots and the difficulties that presented for snow removal. And we also heard concerns generally that different provisions of Title 16 create conflicting or different requirements, which as a whole made both interpretation and implementation and enforcement difficult. So what we endeavored to do was to present a document that addressed those concerns and was much more accessible for members of the public. Some of the feedback that we'd received from council previously was that council intended or desired for the revised Title 16 to be at a 4th grade reading level or accessible to a 10-year-old. And while I'm not sure that we achieved that, we hopefully got a little bit closer. So what we've done is we've divided Title 16 into 6 divisions or sections, which we intend to work through concurrently with both council and the Planning Commission at a series of meetings. Those divisions are first the general section, which includes overarching provisions that explain how Title 16 should work. It includes purpose statements, statements of intent, and definitions. And those definitions in particular, we believe, are particularly responsive to concerns we've heard from members of the public. At prior meetings, for example, there was a concern about mobile homes and whether those could be regulated in a manner similar to real property. And our definition section addresses many of those issues. The second division pertains to zoning districts, which identifies specific zoning districts in the city and the zoning map. It, in contrast to the existing Title 16, includes a chapter on each zoning district that clearly lays out what a property owner or developer can and can't do in certain zoning districts. Third, there's a division addressing the downtown overlay district, but separates out additional language which allows for the possibility of future overlay districts and ensures that the downtown overlay district operates in a manner that's more consistent with the city's existing comprehensive plan. It also allows for flexibility to adjust as a future comprehensive plan is enacted. Fourth, there's a division pertaining to use and development regulations, which includes general zoning district uses, density and dimensional standards, the Wasilla sign code, and pared down, leaner and more approachable landscaping and parking standards. Some of the feedback that we heard consistently was that these were areas where folks would like to see significantly fewer regulations and hurdles for business owners, and that's what we've attempted to do here. Fifth, there's a division pertaining to permitting requirements, including administrative permits, conditional use permits, planned unit developments, subdivision provisions, and the variance process. And one of the most significant changes that the proposed ordinance provides is simplifying permitting from a three-tiered, slightly redundant permitting process to a two-tiered permitting process, which involves an administrative permit, which is essentially a check-the-box permitting process, which is designed to reduce the planning department's discretion for certain uses, and then conditional use permits, which allow a little bit more flexibility in determining whether a use should or shouldn't be allowed for a particular piece of property. And finally, there's the Administration and Procedures Division, which explains the procedures through which folks can go through appeals, both before the commission and an administrative hearing officer, and includes a unified, readily identifiable location for enforcement procedures, fines, and provisions governing violations, so that somebody can be certain not only of what procedures are available to them if they do receive a citation for a property, but also what conduct is and isn't punishable by a citation in the first place. So that's kind of a brief overview of where we're at right now. This is very much a working document, which we would like to continue to refine in the coming weeks with council's input and with the input of the Planning Commission. I think the first step that we've discussed might benefit from council's input would be the district use chart. In the red line document, that's at page 132. And this is a portion of the proposed ordinance which will involve a series of planning or policy decisions. The draft that we've provided for council's review endeavors to pare down the permitting procedure by implementing that two-tiered permitting structure, the administrative permit and the conditional use permit. But as far as determining which uses should be permitted in which ways, that's not something that the legal department can necessarily do in a vacuum. So we were hoping to begin working through that with council today.
Okay. Is there discussion? Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Zoe, could you clarify which page 132 you're dealing with? There are two page 132s in here.
Sure, so I'm looking at the Title 16 red line document, and it's page 132 of 278. So perhaps the easiest way to do that would just be to explain that in preparing this red line for council's review, we've made what we anticipate might be some changes that council might want to pursue. For example, for adult businesses, we've taken a cue from the existing district use chart and suggested that perhaps adult businesses might be allowed in a commercial district with a conditional use permit and then excluded from other districts. Similarly, for agriculture, we've determined that that's a use which would be allowed with an administrative permit in a rural residential area, meaning probably if you own land which has been zoned rural residential, you should be allowed to use and to permit that land for use for an agricultural purpose in a relatively straightforward way. But we've determined in this proposed draft that an agricultural use would probably be excluded in the remaining zoning districts. I'm not sure whether council has had an opportunity to take a look at the district use chart. But perhaps if there's any uses that jump out to council members, it would be productive to discuss those.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Crafton?
Thank you, Zoe. I did get a chance to peruse through this, and I did have some questions, but before that was, where were the, last time when we looked at this in the joint meetings we had the definitions kind of side by side with this district use chart, just for help of clarification of exactly what these mean. And that was, I think that actually might answer some of my questions, is just seeing those. And I was trying to find it in here. I feel like it wasn't actually in Title 16, and it was in like some other chapter, if I recall. Do we know where that was?
Sure, if you give me just one moment, I can find the citation for the definition section.
Page 77.
It looks like it's page 77 of this red line draft.
Zoe?
Yes.
Maybe you can read the definitions, and that keeps them from flipping back and forth.
Sure.
Ian, does that help you?
I mean, it does. I don't know if we necessarily need to go through this line by line, or maybe we just go page by page, and, I mean, more you take the lead on how we go through this. I just don't want us all flipping back and forth.
Right,
You
so
know.
you ask the questions that you've got.
Okay, the first question I've got is on assisted living home long-term. Under R1 single family, I mean, I see we've got the long-term aspect of it here under single family, though just my thoughts on it would be that'd be more of a conditional use situation versus I mean, I feel like assisted living, just in my area of expertise, is becoming a little bit more common than people think it is, and you'd be amazed at how many of those are starting to crop up in the single-family neighborhoods that not are always the greatest of things. That to me just falls under somewhere, I mean, I understand where it makes sense in the rural residential or the multifamily districts, including R2, but just under a single family, in my eyes, it would be, I'm okay with allowing it, but more of under a conditional use would be my thought on it. I'm not sure what the councils would be there.
My question would be, what constitutes long-term? I mean, are we looking at more than 12 months? We're looking at more than 36 months? What is long-term when it comes to assisted living?
Councilmember Graham, my understanding, and this is a definition that's on page 87 of this red line document, is that long-term small assisted living facilities are those dwelling units or other buildings which are intended for use in whole or in part as a residence for more than 30 days, providing supervised or assisted living for no more than 8 people. And this is a definition that we've created specifically in order to accommodate federal law requirements imposed by the Federal Housing Act, or the Fair Housing Act, and other sources of law, which specifically define family units or other groups in certain ways, and which prohibit local governments from legislating in ways that don't respect or allow access to housing for those family groups. And the definition chosen for long-term housing here is specifically intended to mirror the distinction drawn by landlord-tenant law for properties which are and are not subject to the Landlord-Tenant Act.
And then while we're looking at definitions, I don't see one for agriculture. I see all kinds of
There's a
things about
definition for
agriculture. I just didn't see
agriculture at page 10 of the red line document.
Page 10?
Yes.
Not in the definitions when it talks page 78 and such. Thought we were making this easy to go through.
So agriculture is defined as a use involving the commercial growing of vegetation or the raising, controlled breeding, management, or keeping of farm animals or poultry. And it specifies that agriculture may involve the breeding and raising of animals for utility, sport, or pleasure. One of the changes that we've made here is excluding the keeping of bee colonies and the production of honey from the definition of agriculture, based on our understanding that this is an area where folks typically don't associate this activity with an agricultural use. And we've also excluded the breeding and raising of cats and dogs from the definition of an agricultural use as well.
Mr. Graham?
So following up on that, use involving a commercial use, and yet down in the third sentence that talks about raised for utility, sport, or pleasure. So if I decide to raise cattle on my property, that's not an agricultural use if I'm not selling the cattle? Just food for thought.
Yeah, I do see the potential for confusion there, and we'll consider whether it would be productive to rephrase that.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Crafton?
Along the lines of agriculture, while we're there, is poultry. So agriculture includes poultry, I see, but then we have a whole separate district use for poultry. So isn't poultry falling under the agricultural sense, is what I'm understanding now? So page 135, we'll see poultry. And then on page 10, farm animals or poultry. Is it redundant, or is this trying to separate something?
One piece of feedback that we've received from members of the public is that folks who might have smaller, more urban properties would prefer to raise poultry in an area that might not be suitable for, say, goats or cows. And that's the distinction this is trying to create. An agricultural use could conceivably involve keeping both poultry and other types of animals. I think that poultry could be a separate use, or it could be part of an agricultural use.
So, let me see here. So if agricultural is only an administrative permit under rural residential, but then we have poultry, which still falls under the category then of agricultural, can be allowed in multiple, wouldn't the agriculture trump the use of poultry somewhere else? You're saying poultry can't be, I guess I'm just not understanding I get why it's included in it, but shouldn't we not include it if it's gonna have its own separate use at that point?
That could be a change that would make sense to that definition.
Yeah, I'm just saying, cause say you go get chickens is pretty popular under single family residential, and I'm trying to get a permit for chickens, but then my neighbor comes along and says, oh no, agriculture is not allowed in single family. And because chickens fall under poultry, which falls under agriculture, the answer would actually be no at that point. It just seems a little, to me, one could try and argue that it's not allowed because of that.
Sure, to eliminate that confusion, we can clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for, allowing people for poultry. I mean, chickens are nice, that type of thing, and I like the way poultry shows under its district, or under its use there. That's what I like seeing.
Mr. Crafton, are you wanting poultry to have its own definition?
It already does.
I know it does, but you're saying it's also under agriculture. Are you wanting it pulled out?
Correct. Yeah, I think Zoe understood that. Is I feel like it should be, the word poultry shouldn't be included in agriculture because it has its own definition, it has its own use.
I think one potential area of friction there might be if somebody wants to keep multiple types of livestock on a rural property, they might feel like they would have to have separate permits in order to keep poultry if they already had, say, goats or a cow. And I don't think that's the intent here. I think the intent is just to have one permit for an agricultural
Correct, yeah.
use.
And I wouldn't want somebody to have to go get, I've got my permit for all my livestock and a separate one for poultry, but then I don't want somebody arguing, well, poultry falls under agriculture, you can't have it, even though, like, maybe we just need some clarification around it is where I would point out there.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just a quick question. Within the zoning of our existing city, do you know of any land that is actually zoned for agriculture? I don't think there is any. I think we're arguing about nothing.
Rural residential is agriculture.
Can I respond to that, Madam Mayor? Just having done a lot of real estate in here, it's not anything that's zone specific for agriculture, but it's certain areas of town that have the capability that one could have the livestock. There are a couple areas I've found where people have a large enough area that that's what they do. They have a farm at that point. I don't think it's necessarily like this is agriculture, kind of like you're thinking in Palmer, almost in a sense, where Palmer has very specific, this is for agriculture, and it shouldn't be for, or can't be for anything else.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to talk about church for a minute. It says church means the use involving the organized worship of any deity or practice, or the practice of any religious or occult discipline, including ceremonies, services, and accessory uses. And when I look at on page 133 in the red line here, it's excluded in single family. There are a lot of home Bible study groups in single family residential areas. I think we would have to be a little bit more specific on that because it says accessory uses. I think we would have to be a little bit more specific on, or to exclude, somehow those small meetings which are affiliated with the church and perhaps even sponsored by the church, but are not church services. I just see in this current atmosphere of lawfare, somebody coming up and telling me I can't have 10 people over my garage to do a Bible study on Thursdays.
And I certainly agree that that's not a result that necessarily sounds desirable. And the intent in presenting this draft to council is very much to receive feedback like that, so I appreciate that. One concern that I think we've heard is that if uses which require folks coming together are allowed in single-family neighborhoods, that could have an impact on the character of the neighborhood. And certainly I'm not sure that having a group together for a Bible study or for a small group would be considered an accessory use. But to avoid any concern on that issue, perhaps it sounds like the suggestion that's being made is to change the designation for R1 single family here from an excluded use to a administrative permit.
I don't know of any Bible study group that would ever come to the city and say, I'd like a permit to do a Bible study in my house. I mean, it's not traditional, it's not customary to do that. You know, usually it's just an interested member of the congregation that works with the pastor or priest or, you know, whatever the officiant is and agrees to do that. I think for us to make it more difficult to do that would be inappropriate, I think. What the answer is, I don't know, but I think we need to stir that one up a little bit and see if there's some guidance elsewhere, you know, that we could tag on to, so.
Mr. Johnson?
In response, Councilman Graham, I think, at least in my mind, a administrative permit would be inappropriate in that I could see situations where an organization would buy a property for the priest or Vesta or whatever you want to call that particular house where a priest would be there, and having Bible studies and church activities, but yet it is definitely a single-family home. So I think if we were to make that as an administrative procedure, that would eliminate both your concern as well as sort of an overriding thing where you would have a use for housing of clergy and church activities within a single residential neighborhood, which I would be perfectly comfortable with. You're housing a family or a priest or whatever. Thank you.
Councilmember Graham, to respond more specifically, now that I've had a second to think about your concern, I think that the confusion comes from the definition of church that we've provided here, which says a use involving the organized worship of any deities or the practice of any religious or occult discipline, including ceremonies, services, and accessory uses. And I think the confusion comes from accessory uses there. Accessory uses in the proposed ordinance that we've provided are now always permitted in the property. If a residence is used primarily for residential purposes and a property owner desires to have a Bible study or host a small group at their home, that's not something that they'd have to come to the city and ask for a permit for. What we're addressing in this district use chart are primary uses for a piece of property. And so the church use here would be a situation where a property in a single family zoning district is primarily being used for church purposes rather than for somebody's personal residence. So this would not be and would not function as a permitting requirement for a homeowner who wants to have a Bible study to come in and apply to the city for a zoning permit for that purpose.
Nikki?
Madam Mayor, yeah, I read it as, the church involved in worship, and that's an actual church service. That's not a Bible study. It's when you're you're using that building as a church, is how I understand it. If you wanted in your home to have a Bible study or a Tupperware party or a book club meeting, I think that's totally different. And I think, to have a church, someone makes an organized church in a house at a residential, maybe it needs to be permitted or maybe not allowed at all, like we had.
I think that the phrasing here, and accessory uses, is potentially a little bit confusing because that is a zoning term that has a separate meaning. So perhaps the definition should be clarified to read something like including ceremonies, services, and other church-related purposes.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. So I think the answer here might actually come from the IRS. If we look at, you know, what has happened in Anchorage over the last several years regarding, you know, the tax exemptions for religious properties where, you know, persons affiliated with the church live, you know, I think perhaps if we define it as if the residence, you know, is tax exempt for religious reasons, you know, then you might have to have some sort of permit to have other uses there. But I mean, if it's just a residence for the pastor or whatever, that's fine. But if he or she is having, you know, regular services or Bible studies or whatever over there, I think, you know, I think the tax code may be the answer here to refer to what the tax code considers to be a residential property.
Yeah, we can take a look at those definitions.
Public Works Director Shaw.
I think one important aspect is to consider what compliance enforcement would look like. So a home church that just meets because they've gathered together is not the same as an entity that goes through the 501(c) process and puts up signs and advertises to come to a church service. And I think that's the level of growth that this code is asking the council and the planning commission to think about. When is the impact to a rural residential neighborhood too great to be allowable? So if you're putting up signs and if you're overwhelming parking and you're bringing worshipers into this zone, there's going to be a point where it's reasonable to expect the neighbors to say, is that a church? Because it doesn't look like a home group meeting anymore. There's signs, they've set up a nonprofit, they're recognized by the IRS. And so that wouldn't be accessory, right? That would be a building that was primarily used for church services. And so that's where the council would decide if that impact is too great for that zoning area and have some sort of compliance, if it's a permit or if it's a conditional use permit, whatever that is. But the opportunity to say, because I think it would really come down to, we as the council, we as the planning commission think you've outgrown the zone you're in, and you need to consider a zone that allows for greater impacts that are more in line with the neighborhood that you should be in, if that makes sense.
Okay. Further discussion, Mr. Johnson?
So, Zoe, I'm still a little bit unclear then as to how a rectory would fit into the existing ordinance. I mean, if the church buys the house for a rectory, okay, it is certainly now a church just by IRS declaration, okay, but you're housing your priest, or maybe priest family even, or whatever, in that thing, so you're meeting the single family, but it would be excluded according to the existing rules.
So if I understand the question correctly, Councilmember Johnson, you're asking about a situation where a church uses funds donated by its members to buy a piece of property, say one zoned single-family residential, primarily for the purpose of housing clergy members. Is that correct?
Correct.
So because that's a residential use, it would not be considered a church use within the definition of this zoning chart. It would be permitted like a single-family home. And single-family homes under this district use chart are allowed in the single-family zoning district. So that, does that answer the question?
It's just sort of a definition then, as the neighbors would say, well, wait a minute, the church is buying this property, okay, so therefore it's a church, okay?
So the way we propose defining church here encompasses the worship activities that are performed within a church as we define it here. It includes ceremonies, services, and other related purposes. And I don't know that housing priests or pastors or clergy members falls within that definition. So I think it's a more common sense approach, or perhaps function related approach if a piece of property in a residential area is being used for a residential purpose, then under this zoning district use chart, it would be permitted as that residential use rather than as a use falling within the definition of church here.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Crafton?
can we jump over to automotive sales at this point? We've got a conditional use permit under rural residential, and I know RR typically has a little bit of both. You know, you'll see some commercial use, you'll see some residential use, but in just my eyes there, I was curious how we came upon that one, because to me, automotive sales tends to be a very heavy commercial use. So to me, in my eyes, I mean, there's some RR zoning that's pretty deep in some residential areas. It'd be really weird to have a automotive business in that area. Not saying that they would do that, but hey, if it's allowed, you never know, somebody might, type of thing. So where did we get to that?
So part of the basis for this suggestion was the recognition that the conditional use permit process, as proposed, allows the planner the flexibility to consider the impact that a particular permit, if issued, would have on the character of the surrounding neighborhood and other factors, as opposed to an administrative approval permit, which removes some of that discretion and instead has that check the boxes approach. What I'm hearing from you, Councilmember Crafton, is that there may be some parcels of property in the RR zoning district which are more suitable to automotive sales than others, and this suggestion allows the planning department the flexibility to make those types of judgment calls. But if members of the council feel strongly or feel differently about that approach, that's certainly a policy consideration that would be up to council to make.
Mr. Johnson?
I'm moving down to communication equipment. Within my neighborhood, there's a single-family house. Right attached to it is a AT&T tower for equipment. So the way I'm reading it is that if I own a house, I could contact GCI, and they could come out, and with an administrative approval, I could contract part of my lot, and they could put up a tower. Is that correct?
I think that the suggestion here is that if a property owner desires to have communication equipment, navigational aids, satellite dishes, antennas, airport approach lighting, something like that installed on their property, then they would first, before having that installed, need to come to the city and ask for an administrative permit to be sure that it's done safely and in a manner that respects neighborhood character and things like that.
Right. In that respect, it would make sense as an administrative approach. If I'm a ham radio operator and I want to put up a ham radio tower, yeah, I should be able to do that with an administrative permit. But when you start talking about communication equipment, cell phone is also a tower. Okay, only I've now just gone from some little antenna that goes up 100 feet to something huge that's an eyesore, and it's right in the middle of the thing, which almost would make such a communication equipment, in my mind, a conditional use rather than just an administrative. So I don't know how that could be split out. You know, if it was a private use of the communication, that's one thing, but if it's a commercial use of the equipment, that's a different category.
And I don't know that that's something that we've considered specifically, whether there could be more nuanced distinctions drawn in terms of the type of communication equipment that's at issue, which I think is the concern that I'm hearing. We can certainly look and see whether that's something that other communities have done or what other approaches there might be to address that issue.
Mr. Graham?
I would agree with Mr. Johnson that we do need to differentiate between personal use and commercial use when we're talking about that. But what I'd like to talk about is campground. Campground means a private or publicly owned use which includes 2 or more campsites that are located, established, or maintained for rent or public use for temporary occupancy. I'm kind of concerned with the word campsites in there, because one of the ways that we're able to, help regulate the homeless issue here in Wasilla is through our zoning, which says, you don't have, we can go to a property owner and say, hey, you don't have a permit for a campground. Well, this here says a campground has to have a campsite. To me, a campsite means it's a place that's developed specifically for a tent or an RV or a trailer or whatever, as opposed to what we often see, which is just, when it comes to the homeless populations, people just pitching a tent. And if they do that on my property, and I'm unaware of it, then the city can call me and say, hey, you got 3 tents out there, you're in violation of zoning code. And I say, well, great, I don't want to do that. Can you have the police department help me evict those folks or trespass those folks? So I'm concerned that the word campsite there might be a little too formal. I don't know what the right answer is, but I am concerned that we maintain our ability to go to a property owner and say, you can't have 8 people camping on your property, and they'll come back and say, well, I don't have any campsites, what's the problem? So.
And that is a discussion that we've been having both with code compliance and others. One of the themes of that discussion has been that a district use chart should be a tool that property owners can use to figure out what uses are allowed on their particular piece of property and to identify a path forward for permitting those uses. The call that this proposed district use chart makes is allowing campground uses with an administrative permit in rural, commercial, and then public zoning districts, and disallowing campground uses in other zoning districts. What I'm hearing perhaps is that council might be interested, or Councilmember Graham, you might be interested in perhaps a more expansive definition of campsite. But then the flip side of that approach could be that if we're permitting campgrounds under that more expansive definition, they might develop in a way which is less organized and less conducive to a safe and enjoyable camping experience.
And that's why we have a planning department, is to make sure that the permit, fits in with the neighborhood and so on and so forth. I mean, I appreciate your legal perspective, but what we need is the perspective from a planner or an engineer, that can say, yeah, we can do this, and this is how it's done in Winslow, Arizona, or whatever, and to make that work. But I think when you say campsite, to me, that's a legal term, not a functional term, and I agree with you. We need to somehow sort that out. Across from my property where I live is commercial property, so there are no campsites there. So what's to, if this code is implemented, what's to prevent, 15 homeless people from parking over there? There's no campsites. The only thing that we could do is, go to the property owner and say, we'd sure appreciate it if you'd evict these people. And the code should be the driver on that, not the property owner. So I agree with you. Campsites is just a problematic term. So.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have a definition of that word to avoid any confusion or ambiguity about what it involves.
Madam Mayor?
Ms. Johnson.
Okay. I'd like legal opinion to follow on to the campground. There's a very large commercial operator in the United States which allows camping in their parking lots. And I'd hate to have an exclusion that would make us eliminate that particular provision, through an ordinance change. That's all. I mean, it's a very nice feature for this organization to allow overnight camping in their parking lot. So what is your opinion on that as to how that would apply to a use permit for under commercial. I think everybody knows who I'm talking about.
So I think that would be a situation where a private property owner or a private business allowing folks to stay on a temporary basis in a camper or otherwise in a parking lot would not be the primary use. It would instead, if anything, be an accessory use, and therefore wouldn't need to be separately permitted. But without further details about a specific situation, you know, those circumstances can sometimes involve the intersection of landlord-tenant law and trespass law, and can be pretty complex to address in general terms.
Roger, yes, so if you go down to the Kenai, for instance, and you go past this, this distributor, it actually looks more like an RV camping ground than it does a grocery store.
Mr. Graham?
So a quick question about the daytime. You know, daytime means between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Is that consistent throughout our code? You know, when someone applies, you know, for something, you know, or a contractor, for instance, wants to work on the road, and we say you have to do it in daytime or you can't do it in daytime. Is that 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. consistent throughout the city's terminology?
I don't know off the top of my head the extent to which the term daytime appears, for example, in permits or city contracts. That's not an issue that we've looked at specifically. One approach might be in those contexts to specifically define the term daytime with a citation to this code provision if that was the city's intent in those contexts. We can certainly investigate the frequency with which that word's used, and I do think it's helpful to now have a definition in city code that folks could look to for guidance on what that word means.
Right. My biggest concern would actually be with state projects where they're limited to working not during daytime hours,
Sure.
but they're working before 10 p.m. So just so that we have some consistency.
Yeah, we'll look into whether there's a state statute or definition for this word that we can, so that we can make sure they're not inconsistent.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Eaton?
Can we jump to page 134 down? I see the word home. Is that supposed to be where we talk about home occupations? Because I was looking through the definitions and I see we struck that out on page 16. I just see the word home. Curious what that was supposed to be.
I think this is an error, Commissioner Councilmember Kraft and Goodeye.
So that would be home occupation there?
Yes.
Okay. And so going along that, where's the definition then for it? Because it's taken out on page 16, like I said, and I didn't see it on, if we're going alphabetical here in the definitions. Where did it go? Yeah, not on 84, thank you. Where would that, do we have a definition for that?
So this was one of the changes that we made with the input of members of the public and administration from the existing Title 16 to the current version. Under the previous district use chart, home occupation was a separate use, which caused enforcement issues because a home occupation isn't a primary use of a residence. If you're using a property as your residence but also conducting a home occupation, that's not necessarily the primary purpose of your home. It's instead an accessory use. And so the home occupation row should have been distributed.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. So I'm kind of curious about the definition for family. You know, family means not more than 8 persons. We have a significant ethnic population here in the Matsu Valley where families larger than 8 are not unusual. Is this, where do we use the word family that we would need a definition for that, and why would we limit it, to 8? I'm just thinking of cultural and concerns here.
Yeah, so this definition doesn't mean that the city's prohibiting large families from living together. That would be a degree of governmental intrusion that I don't think anybody would support. Instead, what this is intended to address is the types of structures that are and aren't suitable for lots of different types. For example, a single-family residence is, as this code conceives of it, a structure that's constructed for a single family, meaning no more than 8 persons. It wouldn't be a 14-room, 20-bathroom mega structure, because that would be a structure that this code would consider largely inconsistent, perhaps with a single-family zoned lot. That might more closely resemble the type of use that most people would think of as being multifamily. So that's where this definition comes into play.
So following up on that same question there, are we saying that if someone wanted to, they had a 2-acre rural residential lot and they wanted to have, a 10-bedroom home, that we wouldn't allow that? I mean, because family ends up in the definitions, but it doesn't show anywhere in this use chart or whatever it's called here. But I mean, we do have homes in the city now that accommodate more than 10 family members, or more than 8 family members, I should say.
So on page 135, there is a use for single-family dwelling, which would refer back to that definition of family. Under this use, a single-family dwelling would be allowed in rural residential, R1 single-family or R2 residential with an administrative permit. If you look at the multifamily use on that same page, that would encompass those structures which could accommodate or could be construed to accommodate more than 8 people, such as those very large dwellings that you were just mentioning. And the suggestion that's been made here is for those multifamily dwellings to be excluded in rural and single-family zoning districts. But if members of council feel that that's inappropriate, we can make those changes, and that would be up to council to decide.
Yeah, I would think as a minimum, rural residential should include multifamily to accommodate larger families. That's just food for thought.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to just jump in with Mr. Graham. That was actually going to be my next point, was the need for more multifamily and having it in the rural residential. There's been many a times it's made it difficult for people to build or purchase properties because of that. So I'd like to see that multifamily is included in the rural residential. I mean, I'd probably say it's just an AP there. That's my thought on it, at least.
Well, presently, city code distinguishes between multifamily zoning districts and single-family rural and R2 residential zoning districts. One option could be to allow multifamily dwellings in RR and single-family zoning districts with a conditional use permit, the same way as is proposed for R2 residential right now. And I think that might be an option that would allow the planning department a little bit of flexibility to determine whether a multifamily dwelling on a lot in those RR or single-family zoning districts would appropriately preserve the character of the zoning district while allowing access to housing in the way it sounds like council is contemplating.
I think so. You're probably correct in saying that it'd be better with the CUP. Part of it too, I was just going to mention as well, was the CUP with single-family dwelling. I mean, I know it gives the option where the planning commission could say, hey, no, we're not seeing this as consistent here. But part of what, I mean, we also want to do is shape the future of the city, and opening the door for people to even consider that is something where we could just say, hey, kind of like Mark had brought forward, Mark Ewing, was if somebody wakes up and, hey, they're not in compliance anymore, I mean, I would say, like the CUP under commercial for single family, we just say, no, we don't want single family in that area, period. And that's what we would do with some of those ones. I mean, it doesn't immediately make people out of compliance, because there's a lot of times a grandfather clause we're gonna put in place there. But I would say that's a little bit of what this district use does, is it helps us shape the future of the city, because we know, again, the city was built before this existed, and so there's a lot of things where we don't want them to be. And so that's where we look at this and we go, where do we want things to be? And that would be a couple spots there where we can start shaping things a little bit more in that correct direction.
Director of Public Works Shaw.
One of the things I think council needs to understand is that, you know, rural residential were enormous lots that over time have been chopped up. And what should happen is they get rezoned, but they have not been. And that's partly a function because the borough manages the platting authority. And so there's an incongruence between what the borough is platting and what our zones still are. So if you look at our zoning maps, you will see RR, R1, and R2 and multifamily, and they have the exact same size lots. That should not be the case. When you look at our zoning maps, they are wholly broken. And that's where Councilman Crafton has seen this, where it's maybe a larger lot, but it's zoned in rural residential. The code is supposed to keep those whole, and when those get subdivided, they should change in code, and then that means you get those higher densities. So when you have someone that wants to put a multifamily in rural residential, the code is to prevent that, because that subdivider, that property owner that divided it, needed to go through the legwork to get it rezoned so that it comes in front of the council and the planning commission, and then the decision makers get to decide, is that congruent with what the feel for the neighborhood is? Right now, they've had carte blanche authority to subdivide and then kind of entice people into building higher density than the zoning actually allows. And there needs to be a geometry attached to it. So I would advise the council to think of rural residential all the way up to multifamily as increments in higher density. And if there's a point where you say that's too high a density for a neighborhood, then you need to think about how you're going to write the code to limit that. If you want it to come back to you where you're going to make independent decisions based on what their plan is, that needs to be in this use sheet. So that's, and kind of what Mr. Crafton was talking about was, you need to look to the future on how you want to subdivide parcels within the city, because rural residential is supposed to remain large tracts based on the definitions of it. And so when you start to erode the differences between those zones, you start to give away the future division within properties of the city.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm looking through here, and one of my pet peeves over the years has been invasive species when it comes to landscaping. I mean, there are certain plants defined by the state of Alaska as invasive species, and the state of Alaska would like to eradicate those invasive species and make sure that they're not allowed to multiply. But right now I'm looking at page 86 here, and there isn't a definition of invasive species anywhere, nor is there any reference to invasive species. And I think when we look at landscaped area and landscaping bed, I think we need to specify that you know, the planting and or maintaining invasive species in a landscaped area or a landscape bed is not allowed. And then when it comes to definition of invasive species, refer to the state's definition. But you know, I mean, we're never going to get rid of these choke cherry trees if, you know, they keep selling them down the road and people keep planting them. You know, and if we don't have any way to go to them and say, you know, sorry, we can't plant those in the city, then we really are not doing what we need to do to maintain our, our way of life here in Alaska. So I would like to see that somehow addressed someplace. That may not be the right thing. And then also when I'm looking on page 85, when it talks about industrial, it's defining industrial use. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth line there starts with, because of their scale, create nuisances or hazards. I'd like to see it say create potential nuisances or hazards, as opposed to, automatically saying that an industrial use is gonna create a nuisance or a hazard.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Crafton?
wanted to go back to what Eric was talking about there on the size of properties, because I think it does fall in line with what we're talking about with this district use chart. Are we entirely removing the size requirements? I see something that was struck out on page 138, 139, and density and dimensional requirements. And without having to go too far into, I was just curious if you might know, because I think, and that's something in my experience I've seen quite a bit, where that's what people or codes do to prevent people from just going in and chopping lots up into smaller ones, is saying, hey, if you want to stay multifamily, you want a duplex on here, you want a triplex, fourplex, or you want to keep it commercial, it has to be X amount of square footage. I see that in a lot of homeowners associations or just CCRs in general. I don't really want to give Anchorage too many props, but that is something that they sometimes do pretty well, is they say, hey, for it to be this type of zoning, it requires a certain amount of square footage of the property for that to be possible.
This code and this proposed ordinance does not eliminate entirely dimensional or density requirements. As you point out, these are key facets of ensuring that lots of different zoning types are described and identified and considered in a uniform way. Those dimensional and density requirements are described in some detail in Division 4, which is a section which we intend to discuss specifically with council at length.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor, I just have a quick question on waterfront. Waterfront use. And I just turned the page and lost my spot. Just remind me here, the waterfront use means any use, including accessory uses or buildings on a lot within 75 feet of a water body. Is that 75 feet, is that city requirement, state requirement? Can somebody tell me where the 75 feet comes from?
It's borough. I think it's borough.
It's borough?
Mm-hmm.
So the borough's the one I need to go yell at for that?
Mm-hmm.
We have, a lot of lake lots in the city that were all originally, when they were kind of platted, were cabin lots and became home lots. And my own home is one of them. It was originally a summer cabin. And it, basically would be grandfathered, but like if I were to move my house, I'd be having to move underground utilities, and then I wouldn't make the setback from the road.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of no way to do that, and we don't really, I haven't seen anything in our codes that really works with homeowners like that. We have stipulations that, if the home was destroyed by fire, then it's no longer grandfathered, but you can't build a new house and move it farther back because then you don't meet setbacks from the road. So I don't know where we have the mechanisms to deal with some of those things for people that have those type of small lots, and we have quite a few of them.
And that's feedback in specific that we've heard from several property owners as well, Councilmember Cottle. My understanding, consistent with Councilmember Rubio's, is that this 75-foot language is intended to mirror borough code as well as, I believe, federal law pertaining to waterfront developments. This proposed district use chart does allow for a little bit more flexibility than our existing city code does. It does not expressly prohibit waterfront uses in any zoning district, and instead allows them with an administrative permit only for most residential or all residential uses, and then with a conditional use permit for commercial, industrial, and public uses, recognizing that those might be a little bit more invasive. So, we understand that Wasilla is a community with substantial lakefront property, and that folks want to be able to use that property next to the beautiful lakes. And that's what this amendment's intended to help effectuate, that kind of lakefront property use in a responsible way.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Crafton?
On the waterfront thing as well, I believe the borough's in a very, very deep review of waterfront right now. I don't know if they've finalized it yet. Last I heard they didn't. And I don't want to really necessarily give our authority up over to them, but I feel like that's something that we really should be heavily mirroring what theirs is, because it's one of those situations we don't want to see people going, well, the borough says I can do this, and the city says I can do this. In a situation like that, I feel like that's something that should be mirrored. So I don't know if you guys have been keeping tabs on where they were at with that one, but I know that's a big process they're going through right now.
I thought, Mr. Crafton, I thought they were getting ready to bring it back to the assembly.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they've finalized it. I know they had to create a whole subcommittee to spend time reviewing public input. So yeah, I just didn't know where it was at finalized on it. I lost track after they got so far into it there. I was waiting to hear what the assembly said on it.
And thank you, Councilmember Crafton. I'm not sure what the current status of those efforts are, but we'll check in and confirm. Certainly, we don't want to create waterfront development requirements that conflict those that are imposed by the borough.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm looking on page 88 now. It talks about native vegetation. Native vegetation means dense stands of forest, including trees and shrubs that are naturally occurring. Man, that leaves a lot open for interpretation there when you say dense. I mean, is there a measure of density that maybe we should use, or is there, a dense old-growth spruce forest is going to be considerably different than a dense bog of, black spruce. I'm just uncomfortable with the word dense there. There may be some better way to define that. And then when I look on, moving over to page 89, the top paragraph talks about nuisances. So nuisance means any usage of a building or site. It talks about things there, but I think we should also in there define uninhabitable, burned, or abandoned properties should be, I think we should look at declaring those as nuisance properties and have some sort of mechanism to remove those from the city. I don't know if this is the right place to put that or not, but many cities have their own nuisance regulations when it comes to nuisance properties, but it seems like Title 16 might be an appropriate place to look at that.
I believe that those are separately regulated elsewhere in the city code, but we can confirm that.
Okay, further discussion?
One area where legal counsel was hoping to obtain council's input was with regard to the mobile home proposed use. This is something that has received some public comment. What we've proposed is that mobile homes can be permitted with a conditional use permit in the R2 zoning district, but are not allowed in other zoning districts. Is this something that members of council feel strongly about?
Say that again.
Sure, so looking at page 135, what we've suggested is that use of a lot primarily for mobile home purposes could be allowed with a conditional use permit in the R2 zoning district and disallowed in other zoning districts.
Zoe, if you take the wheels and the tongue off of a mobile home and you put it on a foundation, is it still a mobile home?
The changes that we've made to the definition section of city code right now are intended to more closely track state law, which provides that if a mobile home is removed from its wheels and placed on a permanent foundation and goes through other legal requirements, it will then be considered a single-family dwelling as opposed to a mobile home. So a mobile home under the proposed revisions to city code will encompass only those dwelling units or mobile homes which have not gone through that permanent foundation and permitting process.
So we're not concerned about modular
Gray.
homes because they're actually going on a foundation.
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Crafton?
So this would basically say that we don't really want mobile home parks in the city, is what I'm understanding from this. We'd have a conditional use permit for if you wanted a regular, just one or a few here and there in the R2 district. Otherwise, really, I will say I really like the correction that we're making to the mobile home one, because there was some confusion where, again, my understanding is again, if you put it on a permanent foundation, it's now for the purposes of a single family home or an office, it could be considered an office at that point or commercial use. But is that what I'm understanding here, is that we're basically saying, unless you put it on a permanent foundation, we don't really want to see them in the city? I want to say there's a few of them.
I can't necessarily speak to the policy consideration there, if that's the call that council wants to make. We can discuss how to address that. The mobile home use here is contemplated only in R2 zoning districts with a conditional use permit.
I'm okay with that. I like how it's written here.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none.
Madam Mayor, I move that we exit committee of the whole.
Okay. Is there a second?
Rubio seconds.
It has been made and seconded to exit committee of the whole. Is there objection to the motion?
Madam Mayor, I object. I have one more question.
Okay, Mr. Graham, one more.
Well, you wanted this,
I'm actually looking at,
Mr. Graham,
there was,
hang on.
thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a motion on the floor. If the body doesn't mind a friendly withdrawal of that motion. Is that okay with the first and the second?
I'm okay with that. I'll
Okay.
withdraw.
Okay,
there's
Mr.
been a lot
Graham.
of discussion lately about tiny homes and where they're allowed and where they aren't allowed. Technically, it's a single-family home, but I didn't see a definition in here that would specify a certain size for a single-family home or anything like. Am I missing something, or is that something we should be looking at? You know, development of tiny home subdivisions, or that is a real thing. I mean, there's somebody outside of town selling tiny homes, so Just like selling mobile homes, we should be, I don't know if we need to be concerned about it, but we should certainly address it.
Sure, as I understand the tiny home trend or concept, I think these would be encompassed within the definition of single-family home that we've provided. The city doesn't regulate building, it's not in that business, that's a task that's left to the borough. And I suppose if the borough wishes to impose building requirements that would prohibit or conversely encourage tiny homes, that would be up to the borough to do so. But for zoning purposes like those addressed by Title 16, I haven't seen other communities addressing tiny homes specifically as a separate use from single-family homes.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I move to exit committee of the whole.
Madam Mayor, I'll second that motion.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Crafton to exit committee of the whole. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are now out of committee of the whole. The time is 7:40 p.m. There are no communication items this evening, so we will move on to audience comments. Audience comments is a time for members of the public to share their views with council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Additionally, over the last year, the City of Wasilla has routinely had members of the public attend and read excerpts from novels, some of which involve sexual content and/or description of incest or domestic violence that are not intended for children under the age of 14, and/or may be triggering to listeners and viewers based upon their past experiences. For those of you with young children viewing or listening to this meeting, or who may be triggered by the descriptions of incest or domestic violence, please be aware we are now entering public comment, and you may want to mute the video or temporarily exit the meeting. We will notify the public when public comment has ended and council is moving on to the next item on the agenda. For those of you participating in public comment tonight, I respectfully ask you to remember that our attendees, viewers, and listeners may be under the age of 14 or may be victims of domestic violence and are not choosing to read the passages that you are choosing to read. Audience comments is now open. You have 3 minutes. Please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name, and if you are a resident of the city.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Jackie Goforth. I'm a resident of the borough. I'm handing you a picture from the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. If you truly want to destroy your enemy, you raise his children. The next page has 18 different listings of how much money the Chinese Communist Party has been putting into our universities for the last 2 generations. I can give you 10 pages like that. And if you can't find these, it's because you're on Google. Google is a captured operation. And if you don't believe that, please listen to the July 2019 testimony from Dr. Robert Epstein, PhD, where he told you that Google hides the truth. The next one is how the Chinese Communist Party intends to destroy the United States. It's by making every child hate everything. They hate their family, they hate their parents, they hate babies, they hate the country, they hate the flag, they hate themselves. Now, how do you make a child feel like that? How do you hurt their self-esteem? Well, here's 10 ways parents can destroy their self-esteem. I'd like you to bring it to number 2. You criticize a child's innate characteristics. A child's innate characteristics means, are they blonde? Do they have white skin, dark skin? Are they short? Are they tall? Are they a boy or a girl? The only way to make a child question their gender is to constantly bring it up. It is an innate characteristic they're born with. Your gender is in every cell of your body, and if you don't believe that, please look at the medical organ transplant business, because they will not transplant a male's heart into a female body or a female heart into a male's body because the rejection rate is way too high. So having LGBTQ books in the children's library section of the Wasilla Library is just part of the Marxist agenda. For children to develop a sense of self-worth, a feeling that they matter in this world, they must first have their parents validate their fundamental worthiness through a process called mirroring. They need to be shown by their parents both explicitly and implicitly that they are unique, wanted, and welcome. Mirroring can be achieved by explicitly praising, applauding, acknowledging, and valuing the child. But it also includes the more subtle clues here, gestures, expressions, or a tone of voice. If your child was born a girl or a boy and they were perfect when they were born, why aren't they years later when you're trying to change their gender? Now, I did a quick search at the Wasilla Children's Library. Children's Library. This is an LGBTQ book. It starts with a girl who says she's a guy, okay? And I want you to know who donated it. Generously donated by a firm that didn't even exist, the Friends of the Wasilla Library. Now, I would highly suggest that the library go through a search of their children's books and they look for any book that has this sticker in it, because it will be a subject that is a Marxist agenda, and I, as president of the Friends of the Wasilla Library, will have to do a cease and desist letter to make it happen. So please, have the library go through all of their children's section and get any book that was donated that is of this nature, because this firm did not exist. This is an illegal sticker. Thank you so much for your time.
Is there anyone else? Please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name and if you are a resident of the city.
Jeannie Trushinsky. I live in Wasilla, but not what the city limits. Got a Wasilla address. President, Friends of Wasilla Library. Yeah, we were established as the Wasilla Library Association in 1938, and we've been doing business as the Friends of Wasilla Public Library since 1985, well documented. And anyway, onward and upward. The things that are really happening at the library. This last week we had Christine Day. She was an author that came as a part of our summer reading program. She lives in Seattle. She's a member of the Upper Skagit Indian tribe. Her novel, We Still Belong, won the American Indian Youth Literature Award, and 3 of her other books have been nominated for the award. She is a phenomenal person, and it was just really heartwarming to see the kids' interaction with her and her presentation. And she talked a lot about what she does as a writer and what informs her as a writer. She writes kind of what are considered middle grade books that are for, 4th, 5th, 6th graders. She also has one picture book about Maria Tallchief, which was just phenomenal and really interesting to hear her talk about. And then she's doing some work on some young adult books, but those are in the process. So that was really awesome. We just changed out the story walk this weekend when there was a moment of no rain. And we have Counting with Baby Birds, which is a really fun, we're on a bird theme in case you haven't picked up on that yet. We're gonna have a bird festival for our end of summer reading party on July 27th from 1 to 3 at the library. Of course, everybody's welcome. We're gonna have the bird rehab folks there. They're gonna bring a kestrel, and we have some really fun bird activities planned. It was really positive. Last year we had a bird festival and it was really well received, really enjoyed. We also have 6 bikes for the Burt Cottle Memorial Grand Prize Summer Reading Program, which we're really excited about. The bikes have been donated, the payment for the bikes has been donated, and also Richard at the Alaska Bicycle Center has just worked with us really hard. And each recipient will also get a bike helmet, which kind of accidentally happened last year that somebody came in and offered to do that, but another patron offered to do that this year. So each recipient will receive a certificate so they can go to the center and pick out a helmet that will work for them so that they will be safe and be able to ride their bikes. And we have the numbers that we have, Bert Cottle used to always say, big box stores would die for the numbers that we bring in at the Wasilla Library on our hourly basis. It's just phenomenal. Thank you.
Senator Wilson, please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name and if you're a city resident.
Thank you, Mayor and Council again. This is David Wilson in my David hat. I just come before you because in 2016, during City Council debate, there was a City Council person who had a lot of political signs out and about and got into it with Public Works Director, and I think this happened with former Mayor Cottle. And this was about, I believe Mr. Giddings said that you need to basically get a higher land surveyor, the way that the code was written, to understand sign placements in the city of Wasilla. Since then, I believe that that code was rewritten in 2017, I believe, and that was a lot better, and it was a little bit easier to understand for the lay person. But since then, in 2018, there was a court case about right-of-way placements and free speech, and that political signs were considered free speech and not for advertisement as long as you're not paying the private property owner to place them. And so I'm just here asking the city to maybe look at that court case and maybe revise the city's ordinances to mirror that case. That was a case in 2018 that was, I believe it was a ACLU Dunleavy versus Governor Walker case that basically stated that that the court issued clarifying owners of land occupants of private located adjacent to state highways may place small temporary political signs under the property during election season, provided they've not been paid for, and the signs cannot be larger than 4x8 in their size. Now, we as the state have not been able to fix that ordinance because it's really hard to fix election ordinances without it being a Christmas tree for everything else under the sun dealing with elections. And so I apologize for not getting, 10 of my colleagues in the Senate and 21 in the House to pass comprehensive election reform items, but this is an item that has been noted and anecdoted in the state statutes about that court case and why that's not really relevant. Now, I understand that deals with state right-of-ways, but I believe it would be applicable to city and borough right-of-ways as well in that area as well. So I just want folks to follow, signs and rules, and I want to be a player, but we are entering a political season with, unfortunately, I will say unfortunately, ranked choice voting, which means there's more candidates, and that means more signs. But that also applies to other signage that's around the city as well, from yard sales to real estate signs and other items that are everywhere as well. And so I just would ask the council to please look at that as a consideration, because like I said, I feel that the courts probably would rule the same way for city and borough right-of-ways as they did for state right-of-ways, since there's already a case presence for that. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else under audience comments? Seeing no one, we'll close audience comments, bring it back to the dais. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to announce candidate filing period for the October 1st city election, July 15th through 26th. Council seats A and B will be on the ballot. Candidate filing packets will be available from my office for pickup day after tomorrow, Wednesday, as well as posted online. And that, Madam Mayor, I think everything else is in my clerk report. We'll see you all here July 22nd, next regular meeting. Thank you.
Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to briefly thank the members of the City Council for their comments on this first installment of our Title 16 process. I think we had a productive discussion about the district use chart, and we'll incorporate that feedback and bring back a stronger product.
Thank you. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to thank everybody who showed up tonight with the comments. It's always good to hear what's on people's minds, and it's very hard to act if we don't get input from the audience. So thank you, and big thanks to Senator Wilson for keeping us in the loop now that he's back in town for a while. So I appreciate your being here. Also appreciate the conversation about Title 16 here it's, like you said, the first bite at the apple, so to speak. So it's moving along, and hopefully we'll have a planner here pretty soon so that we can look at this from the perspective of a planner as opposed to those of us that aren't trained in city planning there. But always a pleasure and an honor to be here. Feel free to call me at any time. Thanks.
Councilmember Crafton.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thank you for everybody for being here. It's always good to see members of the public, just like Mr. Graham was saying. Question for our attorney real quick is there a section that we're looking at next, just so we can, as a council, be prepared to really study that portion of this? Because consuming the entire thing as a whole is a little difficult.
Sure, I think the intent when we meet next is to focus on divisions 1 and 2, the general provisions, and then the zoning districts. There's going to be a little bit of overlap with what we discussed today, so hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit of a deeper dive next time.
Okay, thank you. And then another comment to Eric, if you could grab the mic there. I've been getting a lot of comments personally, as well as in the Facebook page for the Mission Hills neighborhood. We've been getting a lot of water issues, and so I was curious if Eric could chime in and just kind of fill people in with, one, what is the root cause of the problem, and two, what they could do if they are having problems with water. And this doesn't just sit with Mission Hills, but anybody that's on public utilities for that matter in the city. If you could, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Mission Hills specifically was a private water system with its own well. It did not have fire hydrants, which means it was subject to collecting sediments in its system for many, many, many years. We've added fire hydrants since then, so we've been flushing on a fairly regular basis to try to get those sediments out. When you experience brown water, we'd like to hear from you. We don't know when that happens, and what I'm telling my staff is 1 complaint means we've affected 10 people, 2 means 20, 3 means 30. It's not 1 or 2 or 3 complaints, it's a ton of people. But we won't know till someone speaks up. So the best way to let us know is you can call during 8 to 5, or you can send us an email at publicworks@wasilla.gov. What will happen when you do that is we will open a work order with the water department, and we will send them out on a brown water call, and they will have a procedure to flush and let you know. We had not been very strong in the past in letting people know that we've done something, and that leaves a vacuum when people don't know that we arrived and they don't think we did anything, and that's not good customer service. So the new protocol, which is outlined in our online digital work orders, is to get to the root of it, take some pictures, contact the person that let us know, let them know what we did, and hopefully the neighborhoods talk, through Facebook and just neighbor to neighbor. We want you to see us out there. We want you to know that we're taking this seriously. So we're making great strides into responding quickly to deal with this, but also letting you know that we've done something. You'll also notice too on the sewer side that we're back to leaving door hangers so that you know that we've come to service your septic tank. I have heard requests about giving a pre-call, kind of like when GCI or someone else is going to come between 10 to 2. I don't know of an effective way to do that yet, but we're definitely looking at that. We want to be just as responsive as those other service providers that you're used to dealing with, so that you have confidence that we're out and about and addressing your concerns even before you may even know that they exist. So just my pledge to you that we're continuing to improve our customer service so that we provide the services and the quality that you're expecting.
Thank you, Eric. It means a lot, especially people like to complain when, we've got problems and nobody did anything to fix it, and you're taking a good step, good faith effort to say, hey, we're at least going to do the best we can and try. Thank you for that, and thank you to the council for good discussion. I'm always curious to hear what everybody else has to say. Only one person, and sometimes when I read this, we're here to make sure. Sometimes I read it and understand it one way, and somebody else says, no, that's not how I read it. So I really appreciate you guys chatting about this and talking about this. Looking forward to our next meeting. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Rubeo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I have to echo everyone. Title 16 in our hands, our second Bible. So happy to be going through it. And Zoe, thanks for answering those questions that we do have. Because like Crafton said, sometimes we read it one way, we look the other way. We want to really get rid of that gray area and make it black and white for sure. Missed the 4th of July, but heard it was awesome. So very proud of our city for the parade, the new route. Heard it was great. And always music in the park was, I think, a huge turnout from like all of the social media aspect of my friends and family that I know that went to it. So super, super excited for the city that we did. As one would say, it was a bang for sure.
Okay, Councilmember Cottle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Love the discussion tonight on Title 16. I think we're gonna have a lot of really good discussions. I appreciate the attorney's input and kind of explaining why, you kind of lean towards certain ways and definitions. I think we're gonna end up with a really good product when we're done here that we can be proud of and not kind of cringe when people come talk to us about landscaping issues and things like that. Actually attended my first music in the park. I never had gone to it because I can hear it from my house, which has always been wonderful. But I took my 3 young grandsons to it on the last Saturday, and they had a blast, even more than I did. It's like the perfect melding of, you got the park there, you got the music, and my grandsons loved the music. I had 2 of the 3 dancing and the other one rolling his eyes, but had a lot of fun. Of course, they love the food trucks. That's a really good thing. Massive kudos to the city for 4th of July. Every single employee of the city, every volunteer, top notch, everything. If things didn't go smoothly, nobody knew it. It was so good. I walked in the parade, did my own thing this year, and it was great. And people were happy. We could not have asked for better weather. It was not raining sideways or blowing us off our feet or melting us in 80-degree sun. So it was perfect. And the city can be so proud of itself, and I'm very proud of this city.
Councilmember Velock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to thank everyone for coming. Always good to see Wasi and Senator Wilson and our friends from the library. Thank you to our city attorneys for all your hard work. It is nice to get Title 16 squared away. And I do live in Mission Hills, Eric, and I have to say, when I notice my water will get brown, it clears so quick that I never have ever had to call to complain. I just know, I'll run it 10 seconds. It doesn't take long, but that's what I've experienced. And it does happen, but it clears like that. So it's all good. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 2 things. Madam Mayor, how many hot dogs did we serve?
500.
Director Bell.
2,900 plus.
That was a very good party.
Lines.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. And I did hear from a business homeowner, I think Alaska Dreams. They're a business on the top of Roberts near Horvath or something like that. They've had a lot of issues with 4-wheelers, and we see that at the bottom of the hill there at Robert Street on Susitna. I mean, they're just tearing the place up. According to this business, they've called the police numerous times. The police show up, and of course, by that time, the 4-wheelers are gone. But you can see the damage that they're doing to the landscaping. So the question I have then is there any way we could put either rocks or something that would prevent these people from going down into that area and just tearing it up? Because I live in that particular area, and I happen to be up a couple of nights, and it seems to be happening like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. Anyway, so if we could maybe look into that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Zoe, for all your hard work. And for the council, thank you, because I think this rewrite of Title 16 has been long overdue. And it will, with the rewrite, it will be a process, but when it's all done, I think we're gonna have a product that we can all be proud of. And where people can, if they wanna read Title 16, they'll be able to do that. And also with this rewrite, it's not just being the attorneys. We have a contract planner. She's not only a certified planner, but she is a engineer. She worked for the city of Soldotna for many years in many different positions. So, like I say, it's not just been legal. It's also because she has collaborated with them, with the attorneys, and she has been over every bit of this. So, and with that, 4th of July was great. I loved it. I always loved the parade, and I liked the picnic and everything, you know, and of course, I'd like to see bigger and better every year. And nobody but me likes that, but that's okay. So, anyway, it was a great time, and I had a great time riding that snow blower. I thought that was the funniest thing that had ever been. And I will be on vacation at the next meeting, and Elena, Deputy Mayor, will chair the next meeting. So I won't even think about you, but anyway. With that, we are adjourned at 8:06.
Make sure you guys either bring your binders home or leave them, because we won't have